Everybody's millennial prepster here. We're really going to be hitting the videos hard, so I hope you guys stay with me and hope we can learn something together. We're really going to start focusing in on things that are really close and dear to me. So that's food, energy, and just overall preparedness. I'm really going to be hitting these topics extremely hard. There's a lot of stuff out there. Um, a lot of it, most of it probably may not agree with, it, and that's fine. I'm gonna come about it from just my experience and my training and things that just are common sense. And we're going to be definitely ruffling some feathers as we go. So I hope you guys are interested in joining me. And if you guys don't agree with something I said, I hope that we can have some dialogue because I want to get better. And if you know me, I'm 100% open to having my ideas challenged. So what we're going to talk about in this video is seed versus starting plants. This is kind of something that once you start growing your own food and once you actually decide to take that step because you realize that food in stores and produce costs are going up and the quality is going down, you're going to start to hopefully open your mind and open at least your thinking to allowing yourself to think about what can I do to better be prepared for this situation. And a lot of this has to do with, unfortunately, government subsidies, laziness on our part overall, and capitalism. I love capitalism. I think it's great. It allows me to do what I do. However, capitalism has flaws, and it has and by flaws I mean it has its limitations, right? And the most important thing is capital. So if the most important thing is capital, and I have 4 oranges, what are you gonna? And you're gonna get paid the same amount for each orange. Does quality matter as much? The answer is no, especially with ever increasing population that are striving for those goods in the first place. Add agricultural subsidies and resource scarcity. Guess what? We have an awesome disaster on our hands waiting to happen. So with that, let's get into it. I can tell you already that if you are somebody that is hardcore probably into the whole gardening scene, you master gardeners and permaculturists out there, how's it going? Probably already know what your feelings on this are, and 100% you have every right to feel that way, and I agree with you 110%. And I think that a lot of you will say, well, get it from seed. It's all about seed. Yeah, there are some awesome attributes to it, but if you're those that are watching this, you've never grown a plant in your life. I understand in order to get to that position that a lot of these people are in, you have to learn and you have to go through the cycle and you have to go through the growing pain. So I'm going to lay out a lay out my case for both of them. So we're going to talk about seeds. We're going to talk about starting plants. So for starters, we're going to start with the starting plants first. We're going to do some pros and cons. Then we're going to talk about seed, pros and cons, and then I'm going to give you how you should decide which way to go. Stay with me. So let's start with starter plants. Now this isn't going to be an all exhaustive list. This is just going to be something that's just very to the point, very matter of fact. Okay, so one of the biggest pros for getting and starting with a starter plant is you're getting a head start. I mean, you literally just passed a couple phases, and you already have an immature plant that you're already growing, and you already have something to work with. So that's a huge pro. I mean, I think that's the biggest pro. You have something you can start with. This is a tomato. It's already growing. As long as you give it the right environment, soil, compost, water, light, that plant's going to flourish. It's going to keep going. So huge pro. I think that's the reason why most people opt to go with starter plants. Another good kind of going on that, piggybacking off that is you can start later. If you can't get plants started right away, but you transplant them from starter plants later on, you can still match harvest time for those that started with seed. And if you do get a head start in your season, like I said earlier, you might be able to, depending on what it is, like my bok choy, I can get 2 full harvests out of it if I start ahead. If I get an early head start on it, there's no reason why I can't get 2 harvests in one season easily. So those are definitely pros. The next pro you have is you get instant satisfaction because you have a plant, and this plant's already growing, it's already flourishing. You're just needing to give it an environment to which it continue to do that. I mean, who wouldn't be excited about that? Another good thing is your garden we'll kind of, we'll start off stronger because you already have, with the starter plants, you already have a root system in place. The plants have already germinated. Like I said, the seeds already germinated. You are already starting at a point of success. So that's good. So I would say those are big. Those would be big pros. Another good pro is some seeds are just harder to germinate and grow than others that don't have the best success rates. So if that's the case and you have a supplier or you have a place where you can get these plants, well, then that's wonderful because, like I said, you are saving yourself a lot of the time factors in that. So I would say that those are probably your biggest. There's some other pros, but those are the biggest pros for why most people would opt to go with a starter plant. Now, what are some of the cons? Right off the top, cost. They're more expensive than seeds. However, it is cheaper to buy a starter plant than it is to go to the grocery store. So I guess that would be something that I would be that I would most definitely have to bring that point up, obviously. But compared to it's more expensive. Second thing is you're really limited by what you have locally or what you can buy essentially. If you're going to Home Depot, Walmart, or just local box store, you're going to have only so many varieties. So you're kind of limited to the varieties that are available to you. Another pro is you're not really sure, besides the buzz phrases that may be on that package. You may not, I mean, it may say GMO free, it may say organic. How do you know? There's really no way to 100% know for sure unless you're doing everything yourself, right? So those are things to think about. Another con is you want to make sure that what you're reintroducing into your system, right? Whether that be, was this plant treated with pesticides, herbicides, fungicides, petrochemicals. If you got them from a box store, I think you already know the answer to that. Probably most likely, right? But like I said, you're not sure. Another thing to think about is any kind of pesticides, mites, bacteria, root rot. I encourage you to inspect every plant, but let's say you miss something small. Unbeknownst to you, boom. Now you reintroduce something into your system that could be detrimental, right? So that's also something that I highly encourage you to think about. So I would say those are kind of some of the bigger cons. And what happens, you get something wrong and you don't research it. I mean, going back to the money thing, if you lose all your starter plants, depending on what they are, whether anywhere between getting them really cheap or up to $7 a plant, you buy a bunch of them, you may be out, $30, $40 plus dollars. I mean, depending on how big of a garden you're starting. So those are all things that I'd highly encourage you to look at. And those are some of the biggest pros and cons that you're going to get with starter plants. So let's move to seed now. Great. Now let's talk about seeds, okay? And I know if you're, like I kind of hinted on earlier, if you're somebody that is a master gardener or a permaculturist or somebody who's been doing this for a great many years, I think we would probably come in agreement that seeds are, if you can, probably the best way to go. And I'm not going to disagree with you. However, like we mentioned earlier, there are some pros to starter plants as well. Me personally, I do both. And so let's kind of get into the pros first when it comes to seeds. So seeds, cost factor. I mean, you can't beat it. I mean, doing seeds, if you're doing it the most expensive way possible and just buying them at a store, they're still way cheaper than starter plants. They can be free. I mean, especially with me, if you have a seed library that's local, I mean, you can grow all the food that you need absolutely free. There's tons of seed libraries out there. If you already have an established garden and you save your own seeds, which is highly sustainable. I mean, I think that would be the ultimate overall system, right? Would be to take what you already have growing and continue to replant them. So the cost value, the preparedness aspect of it, bar to none. So seeds are great in that regard. The next thing is you know what you're growing, especially if you got it from a seed library or somewhere local or from your own garden. You know the heritage. You know where those plants are coming from. I have some fruit trees that are fourth generation. You know, they come from the same stock that my great grandfather grew. So I mean, it doesn't. I mean, for me, it doesn't get much better than that. I know what those plants are going to give me, and I take care of them. And you know, they're wonderful. Everything from the taste to the look. I mean, you can just see, I'm sure you can tell just by how I'm reacting. Like it's the best. You know, as far as quality and just knowing where it comes from. I don't know what can be better than that, to be honest with you. So those are great attributes. I don't have to worry about what I'm reintroducing into my system, right? Came from seed, I germinated myself. I understand where that plant is 100% coming from. Everything from, like I said, heritage to knowing there's no chemicals, no pesticides, no fungicides, no herbicides. The next pro is just, it's a learning curve, you know, even if you are the person that decides that you're just going to learn everything the hard way. You know, after one season of doing that, if you stick with it, a lot of lessons learned, and you're going to be able to go forth and, you know, continue to expand on your knowledge. And if you can, if you can go through those growing pains, I believe it'll make you a better person for it, to be honest with you. And the experience that you gather from that is outstanding. So that would be another pro. And just another good pro too, just to add on there, since we're talking about that, is the fact that when you are growing something from seed, and you are able to get it through the germination process, I believe, and from what I've seen, my plants are a lot happier, and you're getting something that is stronger, especially if you're getting it from a seed library or you're getting it locally. Like these plants already have predisposition to be growing at the most excellent capacity for your area, especially if you're getting from a seed library that is God knows how many generations old, right? And by generations, I'm not meaning like what I was referring to earlier, family generations. I'm talking about generations every season. I mean, you're getting real life seeds from your area that are specially grown to be grown in your area, in your crop zone. So you're going to get, overall in the long run, a better garden, undoubtedly. So I'd say those are definitely huge pros. And I can go on and on, but I mean, those are really the main purposes. Those are the big takeaways. Now, what are some of the cons? If you're starting from scratch, you don't have to, but if you're wanting to get professional kits, that could be, you know, an initial overhead cost for you. Second con is, depending on the batch of seeds you get, you may not get a high germination rate, or if it's something that you're not familiar with and you're learning for the first time, or even for people that have been gardening for a long time, you may not get a high germination rate. Now, with that, if you plant enough seeds, I think you'll usually, from what I've seen, even if you don't have a high yield, if you do any kind of, you know, extra planting, which you should be doing anyway, you'll come up with your numbers regardless. But there could be something that happens and you just totally lose entire crop, just totally gone. Something to think about. With that, though, you're probably not going to be out a whole lot of money, but that's a lot of time. So time is money, right? So you would definitely be out that. So those are definitely big cons. And then the last thing is, if you're not, you know, it can be, as far as if you don't get a good harvest or if you lose all your plants, it can be sad, you know, it can be morale breaking. And then obviously from a preparedness aspect, if something happens, then you lost out on that crop and you're just out. So those are really the biggest cons. But the biggest thing with all cons, whether we're talking about seedlings, you know, seed or starter plants, is just mitigating those cons as much as possible. So those are my pros and cons for the seeds. Now let's next talk about what are some questions you should be asking yourself, basic questions that should help you kind of decide which ones you're going to do. Stay with me. So let's start talking about what questions you should be asking yourself before you start deciding one way or another. So the first thing that I would ask myself is this plant that I'm about to grow, does it germinate well from seed? And so some plants, in my experience, do great. There's not a whole lot that goes into it. For example, my squash, zucchini, cucumber, kale, bok choy doesn't require a whole lot. Let me tell you, like literally, I'll find them in places that I didn't even know I was growing them. Like I wasn't growing a cucumber plant there. Literally, I can take my heirloom seeds, I can put them in the ground, and with minimum work, by minimum work I mean forget to water or whatever, they will grow and they will produce for me. I'm just lucky, I guess. And then you have others that are more difficult. Carrots, for example. I have not had the best luck in carrots as far as germinating them, but that's because, from what I found, they do have some requirements. So for germinating seeds, some of them require a lot of love and care. And then I have others that I just simply put in the ground and they grow like crazy. So determining what germinates well from seed would be a good question to ask yourself before deciding one way or another whether you're going to do seed or starter plants. Another one is your growing season. Is it possible, okay, to grow a plant not from your crop zone? Absolutely. But let's say you live in crop zone 5B, and you're wanting to grow something from 7B, or vice versa, 7C, etc. Well, you got to look at the growing season requirements. If your plant requires so much sun and so many hours a day for so long, and you're in an area that only does that during the peak of the summer, well, maybe you need to start off with a starter plant that's already there so that it doesn't prematurely see the weather change and start flowering before you're able to produce a good harvest. Those are real things to consider, real things to think about. Can you now fix that and mitigate that with greenhouse germination, indoor germination? Absolutely, you can. But like I said, for some people, it's just it's a question to ask yourself. It might be easier just to have it start from the starter plant. Next question to ask yourself: does the plant transplant well? In my experience, there have been some forms of spinach, Brussels sprouts, even that they didn't transplant very well for me. Um, Now, with that being said, they still live and they produce and harvest, but I transplanted them and I thought I did everything right, and they start to wither a little bit. They don't look like they feel really all that hot, and they go brown, and I think I'm about to lose them, and then they come back. Now, in that process, I probably lost 2 weeks. By 2 weeks, I mean that's 2 weeks that they were not growing and thriving. So that's another thing to think about. Does this plant transplant very well? So those are the three questions I would ask myself right off the top to help to kind of determine what it is that you're trying to accomplish. Next thing I would like to talk about is, to mitigate a lot of these cons, it can be as simple as doing a little bit of extra research and legwork. For me, like I said, I do both seeds and starter plants. However, my starter plants are grown locally. Like these are local gardeners that I get them from, and we do a little bit of bartering for compost, rabbit droppings, and stuff like that because I have a lot of rabbit droppings, and so a lot of these starter plants I'm getting from great quality. I know exactly all the things. I know they weren't treated with pesticides or herbicides, chemicals. I know that they come from a good stock. I know they're great in the area because they've been grown there for generations upon generations. So for me, that's super important. You know what I mean? It's important to know where it is you're getting it. So if that means that if you're going to spend the money on a starter plant, and I highly recommend maybe going a little bit out of your way to find a place like that, or getting in some groups like that if you're wanting to do this. That would take away a lot of those cons. Same thing with seed. Seed library, someplace local, going the extra step besides just going to the store and buying it. Something to think about. Either way, like I said, doing either method is going to save you way more money and be way more rewarding and sustainable, and add to your preparedness than per se just buying it at a store. But like I said, these are things you have to think about. These are things you have to figure out for yourself. Like I said, food quality in the stores are going down. I mean, you don't believe me? Just take your own bricks meter or fraction meter to the grocery store and look at the quality of that produce. This isn't my feeling. These aren't my opinions. These are facts. So, like I said, there are ways to mitigate it, and honestly, I think both starter plants and seedlings from seed are great. I think you need to do the research and make up your mind, but these are really going to be the big things that you should be thinking about before you decide to venture either way. Maybe you're the person like me, and you're just gonna go about it head first, and you're gonna learn some lessons, some hard lessons, and you're just gonna keep growing from them. And maybe you're the person that just wants to take it in steps. Start with the starter plant from the big box store, learn every season, just go slowly and learn. I don't know what kind of person you are, but all I can say is go out there, grow your greens. Hope you guys like the video, and as always, long live the Republic.